Ms. Marilia Mission. She's the Digital Policy Senior Researcher with Diplo Foundation. And today, together, we are replacing Dr. Jovan Kurbalia. Jovan is on a lecturing tour in the States. He's delivering lectures in New York, Washington, D.C., and in San Francisco. With us also today, we have Dr. Roxana Radu, who is the project manager at the GIP. She's the remote moderator. And we can't see her, but she's also with us, is Sorina Teleanu, also Digital Policy Senior Researcher for Diplo. And she's the online moderator for our online friends and colleagues. So they are in good hands with Roxana and Sorina. It is also my pleasure to introduce our special guest for today, Lynn Santamon. She's the chair of the Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group. And Lynn today will tell us a little bit about the preparations towards the 12th Internet Governance Forum. I'm sure you know by now, the forum will take place in Geneva from the 18th till the 21st of December. So I'll give the floor to you, Lynn, to tell us how the preparations are going. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also like to introduce Chengetai Masango, who's the head of the IGF Secretariat based here at the United Nations in Geneva, and he'll actually add to some of the comments here as well. And first, apologies, because we'll have to leave after about 20 minutes. We actually have a multi-stakeholder advisory group meeting, which was scheduled months ago on the United Nations premises, so we need to get back and attend to that. Well, the preparations for the IGF are really well advanced. Over the summer here, we completed most of the preparatory parts with respect to workshop selection, open forums, themes, that sort of thing. And I think Chengetai has briefed you on that before, but if not, he can add a few more comments here as well. I think what I'd like to take the opportunity to draw everybody's attention to, of course, is that the IGF, ever since its first days, has been about continual evolution and improvement. A lot of what we're doing is new, so by definition it will continually respond to additional challenges or additional opportunities. Specifically, some of the things we're doing are really working to kind of make the IGF even more vibrant. So we're continuing to introduce some new session formats. We're piloting a new model for some of the opening sessions, which historically have had sort of 3-minute speeches by VIPs, frankly a parade of 20 or 30 of them, which I have to say I always found interesting. It tells you a lot about the countries and their interests, but was not particularly fruitful, I think, for the entire community. So with Switzerland as the host country this year, they're actually helping to innovate a little bit with respect to some of those sessions. And there'll be shorter sessions with themes and specific policy questions with a small number of invited panelists at the dais, and requests for a couple of VIP speakers from the floor, but with an open question segment as well. So what they're going to try and do with a moderator is actually draw out some observations, sometimes maybe perhaps just the diversity of views on a particular topic, but so that we can actually continue to kind of advance some of the more concrete messages, if you will, coming out of the IGF. So we've got 2 sessions dedicated to that on the afternoon of the first day and morning of the second day, which again are under host country development and leadership. And maybe before I turn it to Chengetai to see if there's anything specific to add, what I would really like to do with this group, and it's such an important group because of everything Geneva has to offer with International Geneva, is really understand what we can do to continue the engagement beyond this IGF. And also maybe a side note, in that the IGF is much more than just the annual event or the annual meeting. We have intersessional activities that run year-long. Right now we have 96 national and regional IGF initiatives, which also include a few youth initiatives. And they actually continue the work of the IGF year-round, and they actually bring that also important local views and local perspectives into the global conversation here. So it's been one of the most impressive I think, outcomes of the IGF in its first 11 years, and it's just going from strength to strength. We also have things such as the best practice forums, a small number, 3 to 4 topics every year. This year it's on cybersecurity, gender, and local content. We have dynamic coalitions, 17 of them at last count, which deal with things such as Internet of Things and obviously gender and development and access. And they're also continuing to focus more on their output. I mean, again, everybody is very much focused on doing what you can to make the discussions and the information that's shared at the IGF as useful and accessible as possible once the meeting ends. We also have a major policy initiative called Connecting and Enabling the Next Billion. This is the 3rd year. This year in particular is building on the first 2 years and trying to tie some of the real kind of implementation considerations to a couple of the sustainable development goals. And maybe the only other thing I would say is that there are some new topics that are actually popping up. The way the workshop program itself is developed is through a very broad call for proposals. Those workshop proposals are reviewed by the multi-stakeholder advisory group, and then they're aggregated according to the theme. So it really is bottom up, and obviously we hope that it really represents where people's interests are and where the kind of challenges and opportunities are in the world at large. So this year there's clearly a lot of workshops on cybersecurity in all of its many dimensions. I really think that term is so overloaded that I'm not sure it means that much anymore. There's also quite a few workshops on artificial intelligence, or what are often being called algorithmic decision making, which is obviously becoming ever more pertinent as well. But let me stop now and give it to Chengetai and see if there's anything else he'd like to add specifically.
Thank you very much, Lynn. 2 minutes? 1 minute? Okay. Just to add on to what Lynn was saying, apart from the usual topics of human rights, access, inclusion, and diversity, and gender and youth, we have artificial intelligence, which is actually the one with the most tags for this year, big data, blockchain, fake news, and multi-stakeholder cooperation and governance. So those are the most popular tags in that order. I won't repeat what Lynn has said, but please do come. I think we have something for everybody there during the IGF. I would just like to highlight a few things that registration has started, and we would like everybody to register as soon as possible so that we don't have a rush at the end. And then we can also plan properly and plan appropriately. So please register as soon as you can. We have also we are about to make an announcement for the MAG renewal. So nominations for the multi-stakeholder advisor group. So that's something new, and you can discuss amongst yourselves or within your stakeholder group those whom you'd want to nominate for next year's multi-stakeholder advisory group meeting. And as Lynn was saying, we still have got ongoing work which has not been completed in time, which has not been completed yet, which are the best practices forums and also the institutional work for working groups, even IGF improvements. So I would just like to call any of you who's interested in that to please join and participate in these intersessional activities. You told me to be fast, so I'm fast.
Yes, you can end.
I'd just like to sort of emphasize what Chengetai just said. We're taking very seriously things such as the CSTD working group on IGF improvements, a retreat that was held last year by DESA, the taking stock activities we run at the end of every IGF, the UN General Assembly resolution at the end of WSIS 10. All of those has suggestions for how we might improve the IGF. We have established a working group on IGF improvements that are cataloging all of those, that are evaluating the current status, and then clearly, for those that are still open, clearly identifying the responsibility for advancing them. That working group is open. It's on the website. The meeting summaries are published as well, so if people have interest either in participating or simply tracking what's being done, you can participate there. We have a second one, which I'm chairing, which is called the Working Group on Multi-Year Strategic Work Program. That's to try and actually get further ahead of the work on a sort of a 2 or 3 year cycle for those issues that we know are going to be with us for some time and could possibly be better advanced with a longer planning horizon. Things such as getting the MAG announcement schedule done earlier, and hopefully the MAG appointed before this IGF will do away with the situation where there's a 3-month gap. So we're trying to do an awful lot of things to advance that. Again, that working group is open. Participation is not only welcome but sought. And again, the meeting summaries are published online there as well. So we really would like to understand what we can do to advance participation and to increase participation on an ongoing basis. It's not an annual event. It's year-round work, very rich work, diverse work. And any suggestions you might have in terms of how we could keep some of this collaboration going would be really welcome. Thank you. And thank you to Diplo for the opportunity to hear.
The Shankitai, and we will share the announcements also with Diplos and the GIP community, what you just said. I'm wondering whether there are any questions or comments for Lynn and Shankitai at this moment, because they'll have to leave us soon. No questions from our online, from our in situ colleagues, and neither from just one maybe practical question, Shankitai, you mentioned registrations. Yes. Should the participants who will participate remotely, should they also register?
Yes. Yes, we encourage all remote participants to register, and that reminds me of one other thing, that we're also encouraging remote hubs. So those people who cannot make it to Geneva, we're encouraging you to make a remote hub, get together with a group of friends or with a group of people and participate that way. We will make time for you if you register with us. We'll send you information about the various themes and the various workshops, and also if you indicate interest, we'll make time for you to make an intervention during those sessions.
Perfect. Thank you, Shankitai. Thank you, Lynn. It was a pleasure to have you with us. And we'll move on to see what the main events in September were and are, because some of them are still going on. So can we have the slides, please? The first one. All right, quite a few events in September. It's a busy autumn. September, October, November, and December will be quite busy. All these are the main events. Maybe I can highlight a few, like, for example, the BRIC Summit, which took place in Xiamen in the first week of September. And the BRIC Summit will mention the declaration with regards to one of the trends and the developments which Marilia will describe for us. I may also mention there's the working group on enhanced cooperation going on this week, and in parallel there is also the WTO public forum going on in Geneva. The GIP is observing the discussions quite closely. In fact, we have rapporteurs reporting from the digital policy related sessions and at the WTO, and the reports will be available within a few hours after each session on the dedicated space. And we will also publish a final report from the WTO on Monday. Also quite important this week is the Tallinn Digital Summit. It is where European leaders will discuss, among other things, taxation proposals. Taxation, as we will see from the trends this month, are quite prominent, and we will also be following quite closely what the leaders will be discussing in Tallinn, and the event is on Friday. Next slide, please. So, next step is to see at what actually happened in September. So what were the main digital policy updates this month? And here I give the floor to Marilia to take us through the main updates. Thank you, Marilia.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, and good afternoon, everyone. For those of you that come every month to these gatherings, you know that the barometer is an interesting instrument for us to visualize quite quickly the main policy developments in the previous month, and also to understand which are the areas that are gaining importance, which are losing importance compared to the previous month, and which ones are stable, have the same importance as they have the previous month. So the first cluster, the theme that we're going to analyze, is global internet governance architecture. This theme was discussed during the Xiamen summit in China, and the BRICS approved the final declaration in Xiamen that mentions that the BRICS see that the United Nations have a key role in discussing responsible state behavior in cyberspace. So they recognize the UN. They reinforce that principles recognized in international law, such as state sovereignty, territorial integrity, and human rights, should apply online as well. And the BRICS call for collaboration in the development of a binding instrument in the area of cybercrime. This is consistent with the fact that the BRICS have presented themselves as a group that tries to, yes, reform, democratize the world order, but not to break it. So they recognize the role of international institutions, and the declaration makes it clear as well. Besides that, the BRICS also touched upon several topics related to economic issues. They have endorsed documents that were approved by the economic and financial ministers of the member countries, and there are several documents that are interesting that should be read together with the final declaration as well. Another area that stayed stable in this previous month was security. Security remains important and stable. And so one of the things that happened in the field of security was that the president of the European Commission gave his State of the Union address, and he mentioned that he recognizes that Europe is still in a fragile situation when it comes to cyber attacks, and more should be done to improve the situation in Europe. So in order to achieve that, one of the proposals is to strengthen ENISA, which is the European Union regulatory agency that deals with network security and also information security, and strengthen this particular institution when it comes to resources, financial resources, human resources, so ENISA can provide more support to member states who are perhaps facing problems with cyber attacks. So security is one of the things that we're going to see in the next months as being important. Next slide, please. E-commerce and internet economy are gaining importance compared to the previous month. As I mentioned before, not only the BRICS talked about e-commerce and economic issues, but there are several regional trade agreements that are gaining pace and moving forward. One of them is the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. This is an instrument that has gained importance after the US has pulled back from the TPP. So the countries in Asia are trying to approve RCEP with a more speedy, in a more speedy way. So RCEP is a proposal that has been being negotiated between the member countries of ASEAN and also other countries that have trade agreements with ASEAN, such as China, India, Japan. And together, what is interesting when it comes to RCEP is that these countries, they account for almost half of the world population, and they account for a quarter of the global trade. So if this agreement is indeed approved, it will set rules not only for the trade of goods, services, but also investments and intellectual property as well. So it's a quite comprehensive agreement. The next meeting of the negotiating parties will take place next month. So they are trying to speed up the process of negotiation to see it approved more quickly. In the field of digital rights, moving on to this area, we saw a very interesting decision being taken by the Spanish European Data Protection Authority, fining Facebook in more than $1 million related to the fact that Facebook has been found sharing personal information, personal data, including data that have a sensitive nature, such as personal ideological information with third parties. So this information is being used to target people when it comes to marketing and advertising. So this is quite an interesting decision from the Spanish authorities, and let's see if this will reverberate or not in other European countries, especially in the context of the approval of the new GDPR. Next slide, please. In jurisdiction, we also had a very interesting decision. We know that jurisdiction is one of the trickiest issues when it comes to internet governance, and there are always conflicting decisions being made by different courts. One interesting news in the field of jurisdiction is that in the United States, the U.S. Justice Department has mentioned that Google will now agree to deliver information that is not stored in the US that has been requested by the US authorities in search warrants. So there were different and conflicting opinions with regards to that. There is a previous decision coming from the Second Circuit in Connecticut, New York, and Vermont, and that Microsoft filed a case and got the right not to share information with the US authorities that is hosted abroad. But in this case, apparently, Google and the US authorities have reached an agreement that Google will deliver this information to the US authorities, so that we see that even in the US, there are contradicting positions between authorities and different courts when it comes to the seizing information and delivering information to authorities. So we will hear more about that perhaps in the following months. So this is what we would highlight. You have the barometer in front of you. So there are news that were not highlighted here, but you can see them clearly on the table, and we can discuss a little bit more about the developments when Steph goes over the trends.
Thank you, Marilia. Yes, and now we'll move over to the trends, and then we'll take comments right after. So with the trends, what we do is that we look at patterns, we look at what the developments have been, and we try to see what the patterns are from previous month to this month, trying to see what we can expect in the next month. So we have identified five trends, and the first one relates, can we have the slides please? The first relates to a stronger push, especially in European countries, to tax the giants. The internet tech giants. So as we know, the internet companies have been taking advantage, have been setting up shop in low tax countries such as Ireland, and this has made countries a little bit uncomfortable because countries believe that the internet giants need to pay their fair share of tax, which they are not doing. So what happened this month? This month we saw two tax proposals. The first one is by France. Now we saw a few months ago that Google dodged quite a hefty tax fine in France because the French court said that Google did not have a permanent establishment in France, and so Google was not liable to pay the 1.3 million tax fine. The French proposal, backed by Spain and a few other countries, says that the tax, as opposed to profits in the permanent establishment, the company should be taxed on their revenue, on their turnover. They're calling this the equalization tax. And it is, there is a similar tax in India, if I'm not mistaken, it's at 6%. We saw a different proposal also by Estonia. Estonia is pushing the concept of virtual permanent establishment, that is taxing the companies based on where the value is coming from. What has happened in the meantime? Countries obviously like Ireland are against this proposal. We know that a lot of the internet companies have their headquarters in Ireland. At the same time, the European Council is hoping for a common understanding by the end of the year. Common understanding meaning that it is hoping that all the countries will agree. We also saw in the State of the Union address, European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker said that he is supporting a qualified majority voting, meaning that the countries who are in favor of the proposals can go ahead even without the agreement with the other countries who are against these tax proposals. The Tallinn summit I was referring to in the beginning is where we will see more discussions on these tax proposals. So we will closely follow what will be discussed there because we expect more momentum probably to be gained for the French proposal, but also countries voicing maybe their opposition. So we can expect more developments by the end of the week. The second trend, second slide, please. The second trend relates to artificial intelligence. So we have seen in the summer months, in July and August, that it was what we call the summer of AI. And the developments have continued even this month. We saw, for example, Australia. Australia has set up its own research institute for artificial intelligence and autonomous systems. We also saw in India, a task force has been set up to study the benefits of artificial intelligence for the economy and the workforce. But we also saw this month two warnings. One of them is more of a bold statement. So we saw the Russia's Putin. He was addressing around 1 million school children, and I quote him, he said that the leader in artificial intelligence will become the ruler of the world. In a reaction to that, Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla, he tweeted, and I quote him also, that the competition for artificial intelligence superiority could be the cause for a third world war. That's quite a warning. And what he is referring to, one of the dangers, is the development of lethal autonomous weapons. That is, weapons that can be operated without human control, the so-called killer robots. Also a development there is a newly set up group of governmental experts who will convene in Geneva for the first time in November. So we will also closely follow what the discussions at that level will be. So that was trend 2. Trend 3, please. Governments are applying more pressure on tech companies, but this time to remove, to speed up the removal of extremist content. And we go to the UN General Assembly, the annual debate this week and last week, 19th till the 25th. We saw Theresa May, the UK's Prime Minister, she called on tech companies to act faster. And not only that, but the EU also called for the automatic deletion of the content. So the content is uploaded and the EU is calling for the automatic detection and deletion. But more than that, we saw a dedicated session on the sidelines of UNGA being co-hosted by UK, France and Italy. And it is here where Theresa May gave a deadline. So she asked the tech companies to remove the content within 1 to 2 hours from its being uploaded online. So it's quite, it's saying something, asking them to remove within 1 or 2 hours. Technical companies who were also at the meeting, they're representing the Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism, said this is quite a big burden. It represents a technological burden. But the Italian Prime Minister said, fine, we know that there are difficulties, but we shouldn't reduce our ambitions because of the technological difficulties. So he was basically backing Theresa May on this. So deadlines. At the same time, going to the BRICS summit again in the Xiamen Declaration, first week of September, they also expressed the commitment to prevent and counter the spread. So that's a third trend this month. We'll move on to the fourth trend. So the fourth trend is about cryptocurrency and ICOs, initial coin offerings. It's quite a trend since the beginning of the year. And ICOs are a new way of startups encouraging investors to invest in their new businesses through the issuing of new coin, of new cryptocurrency. So this is an unregulated area, high risk, high rewards, because if the business, if it increases in value, the investors make money from their investment, of course. But what happened this month is that China banned ICOs. Not only that, but China also said that the investments being made to the companies have to be returned back to their investments. Why did China ban ICOs? The first is because this is an unregulated area. And the worry is that a lot of investors, expert investors and non-expert investors, because this is quite an accessible way of raising money, are exposed to risks. So the tax authorities feel that they should protect the investors. But at the same time, ICOs, we saw reports that ICOs are often used as a mirror, as a front for fraudulent activity. The question that comes out of this is whether and to what extent should cryptocurrency and ICOs be regulated. Why do we ask this question? Because China is saying that the ban is temporary. But at the same time, a lot of analysts are saying that this is a move towards tighter regulation. So the question we have asked this question. Maybe you can share comments during the comment time on whether and to what extent should this area be regulated. And the fifth trend relates to Uber. We saw last month that Uber was blocked in a couple of places. This month it was banned in London. And everyone was a little bit shocked because no one was expected that Uber would be banned in London. Why? So the Transport for London, which is the transport regulator in London, gave this reason. So they were concerned over the lack of corporate responsibility in relation to a number of issues which have potential public safety and security implications. So for safety and security reasons. But let's go back to see what the implications of the ban are. The first implication is the workforce. So Uber tells us that it has 40,000 drivers in London. So if the ban is confirmed, Uber is saying that 40,000, which is quite a large number of drivers, will end up without a job. The second implication is on consumer choice. And this is important because of the reaction that we saw by the users of Uber in London. So Uber, it created this petition for the ban to be moved aside, and within a few days, we checked yesterday, it was close to 800,000 people signed the petition, which is quite a large number. A third implication of the ban is financial, because Uber has around 3.5 million users in London. So it is obviously, if there is a ban, it is a financial blow for the company. A fourth implication is reputational, and Uber is quite concerned with this. It refers to the reputational damage that arises out of this decision. Why? Because the reasons, as I mentioned, the reason is for safety and security implications. So in the mind, I don't know about you, but in the mind of anyone who is about to call Uber, to use the application to call Uber for a taxi, if the little doubt about safety and security crosses people's mind, then there is a doubt as to whether I should use Uber or not. So there is a potential implication on the reputation of the company. One question we have asked ourselves is whether this is the result of pressure from the traditional taxi companies. It could be, but it appears that another company, which is very similar to Uber, the name is Lyft, if I'm not mistaken. Lyft has had high-level talks in London. So it seems that this company could be moving to London. which is can be taken as an indication that this is unrelated to pressure from the traditional taxi companies. And that is a summary of the main trends and of the patterns that we saw this month, tying from previous months and what we can expect in the coming weeks. And this is where, looking at the time, we're in good time, this is where we open the floor for comments from our friends here and comments from our online audience. Let's start with comments here. Sure. Can I just ask you, for the benefit of our online friends, to just tell us your name and any affiliate and any institution you're affiliated to? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Jan Erbgut. I'm doing a PhD at University of Geneva. I'm lecturing at Geneva School of Diplomacy, and I'm specialized on blockchain. I've got a legal and a computer science background. I would like to comment on the ICOs. I think one important reason why China and other governments are acting, like South Korea and US also, is that ICOs can circumvent KYC rules, know your customer rules. So they try to block the use of ICOs for money laundering. Concerning cryptocurrencies in China, there's also some activities in China that they banned the trading of Bitcoin on their exchanges. So it seems that China is doing a broader crackdown on cryptocurrencies. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment, and I agree with you. There are tough money laundering, anti-money laundering rules in Europe applicable to a lot of sectors, and that is why there is the question of to what extent do we regulate? Because anti-money laundering considerations, some countries are saying they need to be taken into account, definitely. So thank you for the comment there. Any more comments? No comments here. Let us see. Okay, sure. Thank you, Roxana.
A big hello also from the online chat room. And we have a comment along the same lines from Jacob. The Chinese authorities have ordered the Bitcoin and other crypto exchanges to close their operations. The deadline is end of September. And related to that, some have communicated that they plan to operate from other crypto-friendly countries. So some of the Chinese crypto exchanges are closing down, some other will be operating from other countries. And
let me just very quickly reply to Jacob. Hi, Jacob. Hi. That's true. In fact, we know that one exchange, or actually more than one exchange, have already closed, but there are others that will close end of October. So definitely there is a push. China's push, as the gentleman was saying, is also toward cryptocurrency more broadly and not just stopping at ICOs. Thanks.
On Uber, we also have another update from Glenn, who is informing us that Uber is also planning to leave Quebec due to stricter government rules.
Thank you for the update. We shall reflect that also in the observatory. Any more?
That's it from the online room for the moment.
Okay, very good. We have a question. Okay, for our online audience. Name, please.
Hi, Michael Kendi. So I have, I guess, a question and a comment on the third trend on the extremist content. I mean, the first one, I guess, is the obvious one. How are they going to define that? But then the second one relates to the kind of fake ads thing that's come up with Facebook with respect to the US election, and no doubt they'll find it's been happening with other elections as well, where you couldn't define them as necessarily extremist. These fake ads, I'm sure they look like a lot of material that's floating around on Breitbart and other sites that supported President Trump in this case, but that it's probably going to expand to how do you deal with the fake news and these intermediary platforms, in this case selling ads that were illegal because you're not allowed, foreign countries in the US aren't allowed to advertise and trying to influence elections. But I think that the whole thing is going to have to expand to a much broader definition of what these intermediaries are putting out.
Definitely, and thank you for the comment. And tying to that is the question of freedom of speech. Because in the process, while extremist content is being pulled down, we also saw cases where legitimate content was also removed. We have an update from NOHA. NOHA is not for the in situ friends, unfortunately, but online. So after we wrap up the comments here and the events that I'll speak about in a few minutes, the online friends will be able to see regional updates. And NOHA is summarizing the developments from the MENA region, and she did mention an update related to Syria and to some content that was removed. But I'll leave that to NOHA to describe that in the video. Any more comments? Yes, sure. Marilia?
Just to complete Michael's comment, because I think this is a very good point, and I think that there are perhaps two contradictory movements from governments, because on the one side, I think that they are very much growing in awareness that intermediaries, especially social media platforms, they have very broad terms of service, and through the terms of service they can regulate not only speech but also privacy. Usually the terms are very lax that allow them a lot of leeway to deal with content. But on the other side, and governments are concerned with that for the protection of human rights standpoint, but on the other side there's also a concern that governments need somehow to give to third parties the ability to take down speech because they cannot do it themselves. So on the one side, they ask platforms to refrain themselves, but on the other side, they want the content to be removed, so they are empowering platforms. So the relation is complicated because platforms seem to be in a crossfire. So it's a good point.
I agree with that, Marilia. Thank you. So unless there are more comments, we'll go to the main event in October. And I'll just highlight Brands and Domains Conference. Roxanne, I believe you will be there. And Sci-Fi and ICANN 60 in Abu Dhabi. A few updates from the GIP and the Flow Foundation. So next slide, please. We had quite a few events. So last week we had an event for civil society in the build-up to the IGF. And yesterday we launched a new course. Marilia and Roxana are leading the course on digital commerce. Jovan talked yesterday in Washington, D.C., governing the future of the internet. It was streamed live. This week, as I mentioned, WTO Public Forum, which we are reporting from. Jovan is in San Francisco tomorrow and the day after for an event, if I'm not mistaken, in collaboration with Swissnex, San Francisco. We have the newsletter coming out on Saturday. You can download it from digwatch/newsletter with an updated version of the barometer. We have Jovan is delivering a briefing in New York for the permanent representatives in New York. On the 12th of October, we have the launch of the Geneva Digital Talks. So these will look at different perspectives related to cybersecurity, and they will also look at what Geneva has to offer to the process. The Geneva Digital Talks are here in Geneva, and more will provide more information on the observatory and on the GIP website. And at the end of the month, once again for our briefing here and online. And I think we have come to the end of our briefing for us in the room, but for the online participants, you can stay in the room because we have regional developments for you. We have our curators who will summarize the developments from the regions, Caribbean, Africa, MENA. So please stay on, and I will leave it with the curators. For the in situ friends, we'll continue the discussion among ourselves here. So thank you for joining us. See you next month. And for the online participants, please stay on. Thank you.
Hello again. Thank you to Stefani and Maria for the roundup of developments this month, and thank you also to Roxana for being our remote moderator. As Stefani had said, we have some regional updates from 3 regions, so please stay with us. And we start with the Caribbean region, and Andre Edwards will take us through some developments from there.
The Caribbean Court of Justice announced the successful launch of a custom software suite designed to help the region's courts streamline essential services and replace antiquated paper-based processes and outdated desktop applications being used in many Caribbean jurisdictions with simpler web-based workflows. A team from around the region and across the diaspora through a 16-month process developed the first comprehensive court management software suite built to meet Caribbean requirements. The initiative is supported through collaborative partnerships with regional justice stakeholders through a region-wide network of judges, lawyers, registrars, and software developers called APEX. Telcos to reconnect Caribbean islands post-Irma. The CNW team assessed the system's impact across the region after Hurricane Irma and extended free credits for SMS, social media, and voice calls so customers could contact loved ones without concerns for charges. Digicel mobilized over 200 engineers and technicians for the restoration work and equipped Red Cross personnel with handsets to aid relief efforts. A restoration hub was established in Antigua.
Thank you, Andre. We continue with some updates from Africa, and we have Jacob Odame talking about them.
So for the digital development updates from Africa, we will start first from Togo, where in the past few weeks, we've seen some unrests that has led the country to experience internet shutdown from the 6th to the 11th of September. This shutdown affected internet services mostly in Lomé, the capital of Togo, and people or sources say that basically this was triggered based on the protests against the current Nyashingbe family dynasty that has been ruling Togo for the past 50 years. The regulator in Ivory Coast is requiring all nationals and non-nationals to register their mobile phone SIM cards showing proof using their national IDs or biometric passports. In fact, this is an effort to curb terrorist activities that uses people's mobile phones and aliases which will affect the security of the states based on recent occurrences. Taking to Southern Africa, where Facebook in their African Safety Tour have conducted workshops in South Africa and Zimbabwe to build the capacity of civil society organizations and other organizations to help them develop safety tips and be safe.
Thank you, Jacob. And we now have Noha Fati with updates from the...
This is Noha Fathi from Egypt. I cover internet governance updates in the Middle East and North Africa region. Recent developments include the introduction of a new regulation by the Iranian Supreme Council of Cyberspace. It regulates social media and messaging platforms through requiring them to move their servers inside Iran or face censorship. The regulation was actually criticized for promoting state surveillance as well as representing threats to the privacy and freedom of expression of internet users in Iran.
Thank you, Noha. Thank you to Andre and Jacob as well. This brings us to the end of our September briefing on internet governance. All developments that have been mentioned so far are available on our digital watch, TIC.watch, They will also be summarized in our monthly newsletter, which will be available by the end of this week. And as usual, the recording, the presentation and the digest of this briefing will be made available online pretty soon. So for this, many thanks for everyone for joining us today. See you next month. And one final announcement for those of you who are from Southeastern Europe, we will meet in a separate room in 8 minutes for a Southeastern European hub. And I will share the link here. Thank you. And